Okay, hi there, EDUC 3200. This is Heather Lynn, and I want to give you guys some hints about the assignment that you're about to do related to the standards, chapters, don't quote me on it, but I think chapters 3 through 5, no, that's not right, 13 and 14 in Ornstein. And forgive me for my voice, I've had a cold, and I'm slowly getting over it, but I still have a lot of scratchiness in my throat. So I'm going to briefly navigate over to assignments. The assignment is listed as the week of January 22nd to 28th, and that's got sort of the one-pager assignment sheet on it, but you're actually going to submit it over here in the assignments tab. So click over to assignments tab, and here you can see here's assignment number 1, and I've got 2 documents attached to this, but before I go through the documents, all you have to do to submit an assignment is to click on the title page, and it's going to open up a link where you can upload it. As you can see, this assignment, like all the other ones, are 5 points, and here you can attach your file. So if you decide to do this in Google Documents or like a Google PowerPoint or Prezi or something like that, you can simply paste the link, the web URL link, into the comment box, and I can access it that way too. So if you don't want to attach it, you can put the link in. So that's all you have to do to submit the actual assignment. So let me show you what the assignment is about really quickly, or as quickly as my computer will let me. Okay, so first off, one of the attachments you have is a document that goes along with the assignment. These are the North Carolina teaching standards, and some of you guys are going to be familiar with these and some of you aren't, and it's going to depend on where you are in your studies. If this is one of your first education courses, you may not be familiar with these. But in 2013, North Carolina revised the professional teaching standards, and as you're learning from your readings in Ornstein, states and there's now a large push towards having good school goals, standards, and objectives, because that helps standardize learning. We're also seeing national standards that states are adopting in the form of the Common Core, which mainly focus on English and math standards, so that students all over the country have a similar set of expectations when they go through elementary and middle and high school. Each grade, they'll have similar expectations for learning, so that even if they move from one state to another, their curriculum and standards would remain relatively constant. So North Carolina has its own professional teaching standards. These are larger than the curriculum standards. So let me clarify. Teaching standards are what the state would expect teachers to be able to know and do. So this is more about teaching behaviors than the curriculum. So sorry, I did not clarify that well. I got kind of off on a tangent there. The first standard is teachers demonstrate leadership. So I want you to read these standards carefully. Teachers lead in their classrooms. What does that look like to be a leader in your classroom? Maybe that means you're head of a committee. Maybe that means you do a good job of using different sources to think about and plan your curriculum, and using data to make changes in how you teach your students. So these are ideas of how teachers demonstrate leadership. The second behavior is teachers establish a respectful environment for diverse students. This one's really important because you're going to have all kinds of learners, and it's very important that you're inclusive and inviting, and that your curriculum is adaptable. So we talk a lot about how to differentiate your curriculum. That's because not one student learns the same way as the other students. So you have to treat them individually. And that's what this standard is about. It's about learning the needs of your students and adapting your teaching around their needs. Standard 3 is knowing the content you teach. So depending on what grade you teach, what subjects you teach, this is about really knowing what you're teaching. So here's where the curriculum standards are really important, because it's sort of embedded in this standard number 3. This is where you know your standard course of study, which is the North Carolina curriculum standards. You know what those standards are. So in other words, you know what students need to be able to know, learn, and do in that content area. And then you know how to teach the content and you know how to make it relevant. Standard 4 is about basically the action of being a good teacher. How well do you facilitate learning for students? So this is like where courses like the educational psychology course and your methods courses, this is understanding how learners learn and knowing how to best meet their needs through the kind of instruction you deliver. So this is what this standard looks like in the classroom. So it might be integrating technology. It might be coming up with instruction plans. It might be using a lot of different types of instructional methods. So in other words, you don't teach them the same way using the same lesson, same curriculum. You might have to change the modes of your teaching. You help kids develop critical thinking skills, and you work with other teachers so that you can improve your teaching constantly and learn. Standard 5 is about reflecting on practice. So we do a lot of reflecting in your courses in the School of Ed. We ask you to think about yourself, think about how you teach, think about your beliefs, think about your philosophy. This is all related to this bigger standard because a reflective practitioner is a teacher who grows and learns and constantly becomes a better teacher. So if you just teach something and never reflect upon it, then you're probably not ever going to be innovating and improving what you do. So you have to be reflective. And then the final standard is the newest standard. It's contributing to the academic success of students. This is the one where students are basically assessed and through a state assessment, like the end of course assessment, end of grade. Depending on what you teach, it could be a career and technical assessment, but some sort of measure of student learning. And they're looking to see, did the students grow during that year that you taught them? And so that's what this one is. It's your contribution to student growth. So it's the year that you teach them. At the end of the year, did they grow? And that is also one of the standards. All of these standards are play a role in your overall effectiveness. And these standards are used by principals to basically evaluate your teaching and determine whether or not your teaching is proficient or needs work or is outstanding, exceptional. So these standards are not just important for you as a teacher to keep as a guideline in good teaching, but it's also what is used to evaluate you on your performance as a teacher. So it's very important that you know these standards, and that's why you look at these standards in this assignment. So this is part of the assignment, and I'll pull up the actual assignment here too. It's actually two parts of this assignment. Okay, so here's the assignment directions, and it includes the worksheets that you're going to download and then upload. Okay, so the first part of the assignment is to look at those standards I just showed you, the North Carolina Professional Teaching Standards. And I want you to read the standards carefully and basically add one example of an evidence that you would see to know that there was a standard, the standard was being met in that classroom and or school. So like, for instance, pretend you're an administrator and you're going into a classroom and you're watching a teacher teach. What would be an evidence or example of that teacher showing leadership? What would be an example of them knowing the content they teach? What would be an example of facilitating learning for the students? Provide at least one example per each standard here. And so I want it to be concrete. So what would you see in the classroom? What would you see in the school that would be evidence that that teacher has demonstrated that standard? There's a lot of things you can look up online. Go into the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction website, and then you can find examples of how teachers meet these standards. But you can also just read through the standards and come up with examples too. So you can do that either way. That's part one. So you have an example for each of these 6 major North Carolina professional standards. Part 2 is takes you on a little bit of a web quest. This is where you look up curriculum standards. So depending on what you teach, I want you to get to know your content area standards. Again, for some of you guys, you may be familiar with them, but some of you may have never looked at them or seen them. So here's where I want you to actually find your content area standards. So this is like what you're going to teach your students. If you're elementary education and you teach multiple content areas, or if you're some sort of other, K-12 teacher that covers multiple content areas, then just choose one content area to focus on for this particular assignment. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to take the link and go to North Carolina DPI's website. And this is where the standards are listed. So I'm opening that up right now. Okay, so here you go. It says standard course of study. Again, that's just a fancy way of saying the North Carolina teaching standards. So here are the standards. So you're going to pull up the standards that best meet you and what content area you're going to teach. So, and then there's also some standards along the sides here too. So you can find them either place. You can find them here along this bar or down here in the standards area. So let's just pretend that you are an art teacher. Okay, so we're going to click on art teacher. And then here you see something called Arts Education Essential Standards. These are your standards. So now you might want to focus on what type of art teacher are you? Are you visual arts, dance, music? So whatever you are, click on your given standards. So let's pretend that I am a music teacher in the K-8 category. So I'm going to click on those standards and open them up. And it's going to come up as a PDF file. And it's long, but here you see the list of the standards and the objectives. So remember from your reading, you have goals, standards, and objectives. So standards are sort of the broader category, and objectives are actually like when you go to teach that standard, these are the different types of objectives. These are the outcomes you want. You want students to be able to illustrate a steady beat, use accurate pitch, execute simple rhythms. So these are your daily objectives. So you might have a lesson that would cover one or two of these objectives, and those objectives would meet this essential standard. Over here, the K period ML period 1 is the standard number, and this is the standard description. So if I go back down to my Word document, I could put that here. So I could put here for type of standard, I could put, music and 912, for instance. And here, under standard number, I would go back and put, oops, sorry, I pulled up the wrong web page, that KML1, and then I could just copy and paste that standard description and put that here, right? You could put that there. And you could put grades 9 through 12 since it covers all of those grades. And then here you provide this is where you have to use your own creativity. What is an activity you might do in your classroom to meet that standard? So again, to make it easier, I'd go back to the objective. If one of the objectives that meets the standards is to execute simple rhythms using body, instruments, or voice, maybe I would do an activity that used clapping to teach students how to execute simple rhythms, right? Clapping patterns would be an example. I'm a non-music major, so that's not the best example, but my point is I want you to come up with an example of what that can look like if you were teaching that standard in the classroom. Okay, so that's an example using music. Now, one thing I do want to clarify, so I'm going to have to go back and pull this back up. Each of these standards is going to be in a slightly different area on this website. This website is a little bit messy. So you're going to have to dig around to find those standards sometimes. They may not be quite as easy to find. So let's try another one. Let's try English Language Arts. I'm going to click on that. And then again, there's a standard course of study for English K-12 Language Arts. So this has got everybody, K-12. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to scroll down, and then you see they've got them split up into like chapters. So if you're teaching K-5 language arts, there's the standards versus 6-12. So you just have to find your standards. So if I'm K-5, I'm going to scroll all the way down to get to K-5. And here's the standards broadly. They call them anchor standards, which are sort of the broad standards. And then they get into the details for each grade level. So you may want to do, so when you do English, it's a little different the way it's written out. The broader category would be called reading standards. And then inside you would choose the grade level and you would choose, these would be kind of like your objectives under the reading standards. So each one of you guys is going to kind of fill this form out just a little differently because your standards are going to look a little different, and that's okay. Just do your best. The point of this assignment is for you to know how to find your standards and for you to begin reading your standards and to begin thinking about how you would use the standards in the classroom. So I only ask you to do 2 examples. So it's not that time consuming. The hardest part is just going to be finding your standards. But I just ask that you give me 2 examples of standards and examples. So that's the assignment, and I wanted to show it to you because I know sometimes when you present things online, it's a little bit confusing. So hopefully this video gives you some good hints. And that's it.